Now to this story, there's no doubt COVID-19 has caused chaos in your lives, physically and mentally. Depression, trauma, anxiety, and not being able to sleep are just some of the things people are struggling with. But the reality is life must go on and people have to work. So dealing with these issues is actually key. How do we do that, though? Let's find out from Lynn Andries, a specialist in neuroscience of leadership. Lynn, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. I can tell you that I did not sleep last night. I was awake from 3 until 6 a.m. So I'm one of the people struggling with this. Let's talk about anxiety at home, in the workplace. It's pretty intense, right? So through a brain-based lens, can you tell us what exactly is happening?
Right, thank you. It's wonderful being with you. So I think the single biggest tool as well as window into what is happening is the brain-based lens. Neuroscience has given us just basic insights as to what is happening. And once people get a sense of that and awareness around it, an awareness that when we're in a state of uncertainty as we are now, our brains go into that state of fight and flight. Out of that comes a withdrawal, comes the irrational, illogical thoughts that terrorize us by day and night. We also do damage to our brains by allowing ourselves to stay in that toxic state. So the best way to deal with anxiety right now is to learn how to cope. And there are, for instance, 3 techniques that can really help get us to just about anything that we're having to face today. So the best route out of this is to start taking charge of our brains. Our brains, in the absence of that, will continue to just default the way it's always thought and behaved.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned taking charge of your brain, but how do you better deal with stress? Because that switch, right, when you talk about taking charge of your brain, it's not easy for us, especially since we're bombarded with all of this daily anxiety around COVID-19. So how do we do it?
Right. So realizing that we default to bias, to prejudice very easily, we're needing to intervene, take a reframing perspective on what it is and where we're at. In that way, we move and almost redirect the blood flow from that limbic brain to our thinking brains. In this state, we are able to think on our feet, we can find solutions, we can be there for others, we can build trust, we can take risks. And that is what we're needing right now.
How can leaders help others emerge from this pandemic in a more resilient state?
Right. So leaders themselves are struggling desperately. I don't think in our generation we've had to deal with this sort of onslaught before. So once leaders have a sense of how their brains operate and those, therefore, of their people, they're able to build trust. The interesting thing about building trust is that it provides the very antidote to stress. It, in fact, begins to rebuild the neurons that are obliterated through this chronically difficult time. So leaders really do need to have the wherewithal to authentically, sincerely lead, to be able to not be able to be inclusive. And all of that comes from their having a sense of learning to overcome their threat, trusting themselves, putting themselves into a state in which they're able to empathize, which is the first building block of trust. From there comes moral behavior, and it really starts a cycle of being able to bond as teams. That equals currency. If we're able to build trust within our teams, it's contagious, reciprocal. We start building a culture of trust, and out of that comes the prosperity. So this is a trust cycle. It's a positive virtual cycle, and if one's able to do that, you can look forward to greater performance and getting us back on track.
You know, I read a tweet from another doctor today saying that companies will say it's okay to not be okay, but come in, do your job and give us your best. So the role of companies when it comes to the mental health of their workers, how important is that now?
Right. It's critically important. And the phrasing that you've just used is so typical. Just come in and do your best. People are not moved through being told what to do. They need to feel empowered. Where we've worked with organizations where teams have been in an awful state of conflict and heard, and it's the raising of awareness first, and then the providing and the practicing of tools, starting new habits, planting a seed, for instance. It's that enables everyone to move forward. They need to know how, need to recognize it in themselves, need to see that they are, sometimes they're very problem, self-limiting behavior, etc. All of that is provided through a brain-based set of techniques. And they're very simple and very practical.
Yeah. I mean, obviously simple and practical to you because you're the expert, right? So how do you assist organizations to boost their wellness, performance and culture within their groups?
Yes. So what we do is we interact with organizations through workshops, keynotes, full-on programs, etc., where they're wanting to be intentional about changing their levels of performance and engagement, where they are committed to building a climate of trust. And through that, we work from top to bottom. Everyone gets a similar language. We start realizing that it's worthwhile investing in taking a risk of trust. Leaders learn to trust first, to initiate that, to overcome their own vulnerabilities, because they're equipped with tools now. And that is the upward spiral that is going to take organizations, government, homes back to where they need to be.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. It's a very important topic, isn't it? Lynn Andries, a specialist in the neuroscience of leadership.